Okay, now my name is Alex, everybody. Actually, I'm pretty glad to be here. This is my second visit. About a month ago, I was invited here for China Link Speaker Series. At that time, my topic, actually stick up to the topic today, is Dare to be Different. Now, I think as any organization will have a slogan. At the times, actually, we give the slogan out there either for commercial purpose, for advertising ourselves, but that's very difficult, not that easy to leave out your slogan. Now, I like to talk about today about basically what it takes to be different, and from the educational perspective right here. Well, I think what it takes to be different is to realize you are different, and more importantly, realize that everybody else around you are different too. But that's not all. That's just the beginning. The next step is you'll be able to accept others' differences and to make yourself more perfect. It's like a perfection process. Now, as soon as my computer is on, I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal experience in history. And you guys want to ask, a young guy like me, I don't have much of a history on my own. That's true, really. But as you can tell that I'm from San Francisco, California. Actually, from my father's side, I'm the second generation, ABC. From my other side is a third generation. It's kind of a mixed. I don't know how my mother, father, really hooked up together. I mean, but the thing is that I like to talk about actually grandfather. Now, what I'm talking about grandfather is not just a grandfather in a biological sense. I'm talking about more than that. I'm talking about the sources where your genetic makeups come from, and also your, excuse me, it seems it's working out, and also your determinism. I call it genetic determinism. We all live in a determinism one way or another, all right? Probably we live in a several determinism, the intersection there. But most of us actually live in a relatively pure determinism. Now, so for us to create a really competent leaders, workers, administrators, of course, in the future, we're going to have to make sure that people can really break out their determinism that they were born with. Now, let's say you're Chinese. You're probably thinking in the Chinese way. But psychologically, you feel comfortable as a Chinese culture and Chinese mentality as your comfort zone. Now, if you want to be different from this level, you have to be able to have the courage, as I said, the courage to break out your determinism. Of course, sometimes the environment will push you to break it out. Let's say you got a job in the United States, or you're running away to some other places on the political refuge. But the question is, we're not passive, we're not reactive people, right? We're proactive. By human nature, we are proactive. As education, I feel, teach people to be proactive, has the courage to change themselves first before you can change the world. Now, I'm sorry, guys. Now, let's go back to here. So I proposed an idea called cross-cultural competence. Now, this is a part of the actually consulting project I've been doing for 5 years now. Actually, my job right now is corporate consultant, and then we're developing programs for better integration of multinational corporations. Make sure the people working together from the cultural level are actually talking to each other, not just linguistically or on the corporate ladder. Now, I want you to see this one, grandfather, as I said. Now, here, actually, that's not really my grandfather. That's the point. I mean, I don't want to talk about my grandfather. Instead, I want to reach out to everybody's grandfather. My grandfather actually moved to the United States in 1960. And that time, I was not nowhere in existence yet. But my father was about 10 years old, I think, at that time. And then he moved from Taiwan to United States. For a lot of people in Taiwan would think there's a step up, you know. You go from the relatively developing country to a developed country. People will romanticize the whole picture, the life in the United States, you know. Save the bootstraps and the cowboy boots. No, that's not fitting the Chinese profile, but at least you have cars and everything. Actually, my grandfather, he did. But he didn't enjoy it because he locked himself up in here. Chinatown, this old photo, I call it the haven for avoiding cultural clash. Now, when you have a guy that's 50 years old, deeply rooted in Chinese culture and traditional education, you throw that guy to another environment, it's bound to make some cultural gap, culture shock, culture clash. Now, facing this, you probably have two choices in front of you. One is to say, hey, you know, I don't want to change myself. You know, I want to change you. Do you want to learn some Chinese? I can teach you Chinese. We can become Chinese buddy. Well, in 1960, Chinese was not very appealing language, to be honest. And the other thing is like, okay, forget about it. I'm running. I'm finding a little place where I'm comfortable. Where is that? Chinatown. Now, in 1960s, that time Chinatown, the condition was not very good, you know? But I found my grandfather in there in his whole life. Now, actually, I'm actually the third generation. My education background largely English. And up to the day my grandfather passed away, I didn't, with deep regret, really talk to that man. Actually, all the pieces of memories is actually pieced together by my father later. I was that time about 5 years old. Yeah. To make the thing even sadder is that I wasn't even living with my grandfather. Not talk about living. I mean, I probably didn't see him very often. Because, as you know, if you're Chinese American, you understand that the older generation, they tend to concentrate in Chinatown. Where the second or third generation, they go like, what the hell, I'm getting out of here. Going to the other side of the town. And that's what happened to me. And my mother, being the second generation, and she really didn't get along with my grandfather at all. The family strife put my father right there in the middle. He's the pauper getting hit all the time. Now, anyway, my family, in the end, at least from my generation to my grandfather's generation, is pretty much closer to what Amy Tan, you know Amy Tan, right? The writer of Joy Luck Club, described. Actually, I'd like to quote a little bit right here. As you guys know that now the woman was old and she had a daughter to grow up speaking only English and swallowing more Coca-Cola than sorrow. Kind of like me, actually. Yeah. And for a long time now, the woman had wanted to give her daughter the single swan feather and tell her, and she waited year after year for the day she could tell her daughter this imperfect American English. For my grandfather, he never saw the day. Well, this is a little bit family history. It's actually very similar or same to a lot of overseas Chinese. I'm not saying that my grandfather is a pitiful guy. We're supposed to help the Chinese people to learn English. No, that's not my topic. My topic here is that my grandfather, as courage as he was, but he just lack of one step. He can change his venue, his physically from China to United States, but deep down there, he probably didn't have the courage to change himself. Now, I'm not saying my grandfather is not courageous enough, but I want to go back to what I'm talking about, education. My grandfather was educated in the classic Chinese way. And then at that time in China, the international, so-called international school, I would call it an aristocratic school. You know, the school for rich people. But what takes to be international, let's look at the word, everybody, international. Now, if you're physically moving a school where language they taught all the courses is in English or German, and then put this school and the staff in a country where German or English or French is not the language, not the first language. Now, in this country, of course, for this venue, you call it international school. But the question is, international school supposed to be international. So if you physically move the school back to Germany, is this school still international? Probably not. So guys, that's what I'm trying to say. Now, I like China Link. I like this slogan that is say, courage, creativity, dare to be different. Now, I think a school dare to be different, an educational system dare to be different, requires a change. Not just merely the curriculums. Actually, from the bottom line level is actually a change of a paradigm. Do we educate our kids for international world? Now, do we actually train them to really look at culture difference and to look at objectively, let's say for the next 200 years or 500 years, the differences are going to be there. You're not going to change that. No culture would like to lose their identity themselves. Now, as the kids, most of our students in here, I believe, are actually the children from either diplomatic family or from multinational company. You know, the parents are CEO. They're doing business internationally. Now, they send the kids to school. I think probably they have some unexpressed needs. Is that take care of my kids and then try to pave the way for him for globalize the world culturally. Now, I want you to look at here, guys. We all know that world citizen. You don't want to educate a kid in your own school that just say, cooperate in your own value. You want to look at the whole world. That's why we're talking about global warming in school. We're talking about poverty in the world. So that's what we say, world citizen. But how can you become a world citizen if you don't accept or don't know, not well equipped for the culture differences existing out there? Now here, guys, I think cross-cultural competence is the key. Let's look at the curriculums out there. Any school. Do we actually really tailor-made this curriculum that are focusing on the culture difference instead of focusing know one thing about this culture and the system? The kids is going to be the leader of the world. At least we hope so. We educate them that way. As a leader, you need ability to tolerate different and also to reconcile the conflicting values where you create new ideas. We talk about creativity, but how do we create? Why do we need to create? Now, I'm going to say something that has nothing to do with school at this moment. From a consulting career, we found out that most companies that comes to me for consulting is because the company are in trouble. What kind of trouble? Conflicts. Value conflicts, system conflicts. And most of people, when they face conflicts, they say, I want to get away from this. I feel uncomfortable. But I want to give you an example here. Everybody know Volkswagen, right? That company has a car, the timeless classic model. Anybody know what that is? The Beatles, exactly. Is there anything special about this car model, body type, design? I don't know. You know what? You know the engine of the car either in the front or in the back most of the time, right? Now, but if you're in the front, you got an American car, good old American car. You know, it's pretty long. If you get in the back, number one, you have a problem. When you rear-end it, you get exploded or something like that. Now, one of the basic designs of the Beetle is that create a roomy environment in a relatively small body. You see, conflict value is very simple. One, we don't want a car very big because people couldn't afford it. Two, we want to create a roomy area in a small area. See, two conflicting values. Now, when you face conflicting values, what do? You reconcile them. You reconcile them, you put the engine sideways. You got Beetle, timeless classic type. That's what it is, guys. Now, this is a very small example. My grandfather's case tells us that he is trying to get away from the conflicting value. Haven. Looking for haven. Now, I just want to note that if my grandfather didn't move to the United States, and he was born to a rich family in 1930s in Shanghai, and his family wanted him to be protected away from the war and all the disputes, probably his family put him in another haven, the aristocratic schools, and sent him over to the United States. Now, I'm not saying that either of the choice is wrong. You have your right to make your choice. But as an education, I feel, or as consulting, I feel, that if we could create the basic senses for our kids before they grow up, they're still tender, impressionable, and untouched by prejudice or anything. And that is a golden time to create cross-cultural competence. Now, I want you to look at that. A world citizen idea, mentality, with cross-cultural competence, they can create a value by reconciliating everything. But without it, you see what happens. It's just become bitter judgment on each other. You can see this little picture up there. You see what the kid says? We are right, you're wrong, you know? We're better than you. Now, you look down there at the caption. The only universal truth about our religions. Now, we all know that what happens in the Middle East. We all know all those terrorist attacks. But for the bombers, they're not thinking they're taking people's lives. They're thinking they'll become martyrs. Now, I think their cross-cultural competence probably zero. They couldn't tolerate any difference. Again, I want to talk about the basic thing is that I think what it takes to be different is to be able to be different from yourself first. If you be able to stand out of your own paradigm, you have the chance to create a new paradigm. New paradigm creates new tools, instruments, industries. And here you have creativity. And that's what I firmly believe in. Now, my grandfather gave me the most valuable lesson is that you cannot survive in this globalized world by being the same. You got to be different. And you create, and you flourish. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks.